Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Samantha Watson, Florida Association of ACOs, Director of Member and Partner Services. We're excited for this opportunity to present to you our next installment of our webinar series, Unlocking the Future of Care Coordination, Harnessing AI for ACO Success. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items, just so you know how to participate in today's event. You'll see a user control panel on your computer desktop on the bottom of your screen. You can listen in via your computer speakers, or if you would prefer to join over the phone, just select the arrow up on the mute button and choose switch to phone audio, and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to your presenter today by typing your questions into the questions tab. You may send in your questions at any time during this presentation. We will collect these and address them during the QA session at the end of today's presentation. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to our presenter.
Hello, hello. Sam, can you hear me? We're good? Audio, video?
Yes, you're good.
Fantastic. All right. Well, good afternoon to everybody, at least over here on the East Coast. It's wonderful to be here today talking about care coordination and the incredible opportunity that we have right now to incorporate artificial intelligence. We'll talk about what it is not. There's a lot of noise around artificial intelligence right now. I think we're probably averaging at about 500 companies a day being started around it. So I think we're almost at the point where AI is almost a negative word. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we're almost there, where there's so much noise around it that the second you hear AI, your brain just turns off because it's just everywhere. And so if that's your experience, if that's what your experience has been over the last year approximately, then I hope this will be illuminating. We'll talk about not just theory, but practical, exactly how you can look at AI and its involvement in your life and in your ACO primarily, and even more specifically in your care coordination efforts. So we'll provide a framework for thinking about it. And so let me share my screen here so we can get these slides up. Okay. Let's see. All right. You should be able to see my screen. Okay. So the title of this webinar, Unlocking the Future of Care Coordination, Harnessing AI for ACO Success. And so if you're here today, chances are you are running an ACO. First of all, that's awesome. Congratulations. ACOs, running a proper ACO is no simple feat, and it is obviously advancing our national interest in moving towards value-based care. And so all the work that every single one of you do is fantastic and incredible, and kudos to you. Let's see here. Nice. All right, I'll give it a little bit of an introduction about myself, just while a couple more people are jumping in here. Once again, really happy to join today. My name is Mendel Erlenwine. That's Erlenwine. It's one last name. I'm the CEO of a company called Previva Health Group. Previva provides white-labeled preventive care management services that many of you are very familiar with, such as chronic care management, remote patient monitoring, annual wellness visit support, transitional care management, and behavioral health integration. And so you are all very familiar. We have some fantastic ACO partners. Obviously, it is in extreme interest of ACOs for their members to be running these programs. And so we aim to help do that. And we'll talk about some of the successes that we've had and exactly how and what I'm using internally with our company, and how you can then go ahead and adopt that for your ACO and your care coordination efforts. That will be the purpose of today. Starting Previva Health Group a couple years back, it's been an incredible journey building it, seeing the direct impact to patients and changing their lives, saving lives in many instances. And it really comes down to proper care coordination. And so in growing Previva Health Group, that kind of sparked my interest in value-based care as a general model. I find it fascinating and makes total sense to align financial incentives together with patient care. And so that's always kind of made sense to me. And that got, so my interest, I started becoming very passionate about value-based care, and I started a podcast called the Healthcare Trailblazers Podcast. And that has quickly become the #1 podcast in the value-based care space. It's been a lot of fun. We just passed over 5 million views on YouTube, very active on LinkedIn as well. And more interesting to me than the clicks and views is the opportunity that is presented to me personally to sit down with some of the most tremendous innovators and implementers in value-based care across the country. On the public side, we've talked to the Chief Medical Officer of Medicaid. We've had the Chief Strategy Officer at Medicare, the Chief Innovation Officer at CMMI, the Innovation Center for Medicare and Medicaid. And on the private side, we've talked with just dozens of CEOs from St. Luke's Health System, Oak Street Health, ChenMed, Northwell, Dean of Harvard Medical School, just dozens of organizations across the country, Walmart Health, and a bunch others that are actually acting on value-based care. And so that's really helped kind of continue to on a personal level, continue to educate about that value-based care, about its implementation, the best way to go about it, the mistakes, the successes. And that's been a lot of fun for me personally. And so that's kind of a little bit about me. Once again, thanks everyone for joining. And let's jump in a little bit here. Okay, there's a couple questions that I would like everyone to walk away from today's webinar having answered. And so let's go through them. How can artificial intelligence help my care coordination efforts? That's a question that we will endeavor to answer. Can I trust artificial intelligence, especially when it comes to healthcare, as we'll talk about? This is a huge concern for people. What does it mean that it's going to be involved in patient care, in care coordination? Can I trust that process? Can I trust whatever piece of involvement it will have? So we'll talk about that. Will AI replace our jobs and our care coordinators, right? This is a huge question that everybody has regarding artificial intelligence. Where does it start? Where does it end? What is its proper use? What is a improper use of AI? And really trying to get to, is it going to help, or is it going to deter? Not to digress too much, but on a large level of artificial intelligence, maybe we'll talk about this in a little bit. This is a question for humanity at large. Will AI? This is a legitimate question that many people are asking, if AI is the beginning of the end of the human race. And so we'll talk about what that actually means. But it's a real question. And then finally, how can I sift through the noise and stay ahead of the AI curve? Once again, AI has become such a buzzword. I don't know about you guys, but every second article on LinkedIn, every second post on LinkedIn, every second article in the news feed is all about some new tool, some new ability, some new prompt. And there's a lot of noise, and a lot of it is false. A lot of it is maybe misinformed. A lot of it is just trying to get clicks. And so I will endeavor to show how we can kind of sift through it and just give. I'm not going to go through every AI instance, of course, today, but I will. I'll try to give some real practical examples of how we are using AI and in our care coordination efforts, and how you guys can then as well. Quick question for the crowd. If any of you have actually used any form of artificial intelligence application, if you can just go ahead and throw a 1 in the chat, just type 1 in the chat, just so we can start. Would love to engage a little bit. Okay. Moving on here. Let's talk about, now that that's the overview for the webinar, that's what we're going to try to do today. Let's take a step back and talk about care coordination for ACOs. And this is information that every single one of you on this call today understand very, very well. But let's go through it. And so what are some of the reasons that care coordination is so important specifically to ACOs? Well, first of all, there's obviously the improved patient outcomes, right? ACOs are obviously designed to streamline and optimize patient care. And when care is properly coordinated, patients receive the right care at the right time, reducing the chance of errors, mistreatments, or overtreatments. And of course, every single one of you understand this perfectly. Cost efficiency. A primary goal of ACOs is obviously to lower healthcare costs while still maintaining or in fact improving the quality of care. And so obviously care coordination can reduce duplicate services, unnecessary hospitalizations, and direct patients to the most effective and high quality providers. Thirdly, the value-based care model, unlike fee-for-service models where providers are paid based on the number of services, ACOs are obviously rewarded based on patient outcomes. This incentivizes coordinated care where the focus shifts to preventive care, proper management of chronic conditions, and other strategies that improve health outcomes. And just want to touch on this again because this is a personal, passion of mine, the entire payment model of value-based care. It's so incredible. And what I personally find, what resonates with me personally about the value-based care payment model in general is that it forces innovation in the right direction, because being that it shifts the entire mindset, because it flips the entire reimbursement model on its head from essentially being paid for patients to be sick to being incentivized to manage patients better. It drives such incredible levels of innovation. I had the opportunity of having Dr. David Pate, who was the CEO of St. Luke's Health System, on the podcast. And I just want to share a short story that he shared. He did something really, really incredible. Over a 10-year period, he built St. Luke's to $3 billion in revenue. The incredible part was that he turned 1 billion of the 3 billion, so a third of their revenue, into value-based care. And as you all know, it is challenging enough to run a value-based care organization. That is difficult. But to come into a fee-for-service environment and from within the confines of a fee-for-service environment to then build a value-based care vertical is extraordinarily painful, right? And he accomplished it, and he talks about value-based care a lot. He's now since retired. But there was one particular story that he told me that was really fantastic. He talked about how they had an issue with their post-op infections. The rate was relatively standard, but he wanted to get it down to zero, or as close to zero as he possibly can, given the fact that they were working in value-based care payments. And so what he ended up doing was he ended up partnering with a microchip manufacturer that was local to his area. I forget the name of the company right now. But he realized that they had a certain similarity, because microchips are so tiny and so sensitive that the air that's around the manufacturing has to be also super sterile and super clean. And any tiny micro impurities in the air can really affect the microchip. And so he partnered up with them, and they actually installed some machinery that the microchip factory had in the OR at St. Luke's. And what they noticed when reading the data was that they were working until then on a lean strategy for the OR. So they wanted just the minimal amount of things necessary inside the operating room. And so multiple times throughout a surgery, the surgeons or the people inside the room had to go outside to come and bring something back in. And he noticed that when reading the data through these machines that were analyzing the air, every time the doors opened and then shut, it was gushing in new air that had tiny micro impurities in the air, which was then causing some of those post-op infections. And so they used that to then make the determination that they should, in fact, go the opposite route with the OR and have everything necessary inside of that room at that time, so that there was no need for anybody during the procedure to exit the room and re-enter. And they watched their post-op infection rate nosedive. I forget the exact number, but it went to extremely, extremely low. And what I love about that story is that it really highlights it's not the outcome. It's not the thing that he did. It's it's what being in value-based care can do to the brain of a healthcare leader, and really force the person to think in outside the box. And why would he partner with a microchip company that is seemingly so random and unrelated to healthcare? But because he was forced to think in such an innovative way, he came up with these solutions. And you see these all across the country. You guys know this as running ACOs. It forces you to think differently, and the innovation that comes about through value-based care is incredible, and moving obviously our country and our gigantic, wonderful problem called healthcare in this country in the right direction. Let's go back to care coordination for ACOs and why it's important. Better patient experience. Coordinated care often translates to a smoother patient experience. This is most definitely true. Patients are less likely to undergo redundant tests or answer the same questions multiple times, and they're more likely to feel that their care team is well-informed and collaborative. This is absolutely true. We're talking to thousands of patients every month at our team here at Proviva, as well as you guys. And I'm sure you know this as well. The number one issue that patients have with their doctor's office is access. They call the front desk and the phone rings and rings and rings, and then finally throws them to the voicemail. And first of all, it's inconvenient, but it even often translates to more than inconveniences, because often the patient is calling in to get a medication refilled or an appointment scheduled, and then they just give up, and then they don't. And that obviously leads to hospitalizations, utilization, and problems. So having a better patient experience through proper care coordination, where there are care coordinators that are spaced out effectively for the right amount of patients, is a huge benefit to ACOs, of course. Data sharing and integration. ACOs often have multiple providers across various specialties. Care coordination requires integrated EHRs, which ensures that all providers have access to updated patient information. This reduces information silos and ensures informed decision making. This is an obvious pain point that ACOs both have and solve at the same time, which is taking that data and actually having it continuously move, right? I'm sure all of you have members that are still on patient charts, and I'm sure you are pulling teeth in those offices to get them off the patient charts and into some sort of EHR. And so you can't really do proper care coordination without a good, data platform, typically in EHR. And so kind of forces the solution. Reduction in healthcare disparities. Proper care coordination can help reduce disparities by ensuring all patients, regardless of their socioeconomic or ethnic backgrounds, receive the necessary care without unnecessary delays. Super important. Obviously, we as a country are moving to a greater and greater understanding of the impact of social determinants of health, of contextual issues regarding healthcare. Shout out to a incredible physician who was actually just on the podcast this week, hasn't gone live yet. Dr. Zev Neuwirth. I highly recommend everyone goes and checks out his new book. It's called Beyond the Walls, and it's an incredible read. I listened to it on Audible, and he breaks down some of these out of the box thinking solutions for healthcare in a really positive way. This is not a paid pitch. I genuinely really enjoyed the book, and I recommend you check it out. But one of the things that he talks about is whole patient care and contextual healthcare. And even though to us in the ACO world it might seem obvious, this is definitely something that is still gaining traction in the overall healthcare landscape, as you're all well aware. And so being able to solve for that is incredible. And the way to solve for that is proper care coordination, where you can insert workflows for asking the right questions that will then give the physician the right context and the right data to make decisions, rather than just looking at problem medication, right? Finally, risk management. Coordinated care can identify high-risk patients sooner and manage their conditions more effectively, reducing adverse outcomes. And this is probably one of the most important for ACOs. Obviously, really good care coordination. You're following up with those patients. It's proactive, it's preventive, and thus you're catching these things that fall through the cracks. And again, this is something that I'm blessed and lucky enough to see on literally a daily basis. And so catching those things and coordinating proper care will obviously bring down the high-risk patients and their utilization, which is obviously super tremendous for ACOs. And so obviously care coordination, the point of all this is that care coordination is not just important, but integral and essential to proper execution of any value-based care strategy, and specifically to the incentives that are outlined in the ACO model. And so to our next slide, the question is, and so in the practical form, this usually takes form in general care coordination, but more specifically, as you're all well aware, the programs that, like I mentioned earlier, chronic care management, remote patient monitoring, transitional care management, annual wellness visit, obviously getting that done is a super important checkbox. And so this takes form in some very specific programs, which allows us to gather some data. And as you are all maybe aware, the actual data is horrible. Less than 4% of eligible Medicare beneficiaries are actually receiving, this is just an example of CCM. AWV may be a little high, probably lower, honestly. RPM definitely super low. Transitional care management probably a little bit higher. But there's overall, there's very, very little adoption of these programs. And the question is why? And the answer, you all know. The answer is that it's very difficult for your members on the doctor level to implement a program like CCM or proper care coordination, because unlike what many people think, that doctors are all swimming in cash, you and I all know that most doctors, maybe the chiropractors and the plastic surgeons are swimming in cash, but most doctors are actually just struggling to keep the lights on. And so to have an extra person that is going to work full time to have a scalable and a efficient and effective care management process is usually simply unattainable for a lot of your members, as you're well aware. So the other option is for the ACO to do. But there's challenges there. First of all, some of the same challenges, just getting the right staff and putting a system into place is going to inhibit the ability to do that. But also patients are, unfortunately, especially in a Medicare demographic, patients are inundated with scams all day, every day. And if it's not their doctor who they've confirmed that this care coordinator worked for their doctor, then chances are they're not going to take very kindly to them random organization calling them. And so it's a huge pain point for ACOs on how to get these programs done. Can you do it yourself? Well, then you have a disconnected person calling the patient. Can you get your doctor to do it, or can you have someone work under the doctor? Well, that requires a really good system and just a coordinated effort, which is also difficult as well. So those are some of the reasons around the really almost minuscule adoption rate of a lot of these services. And let's talk about care coordination. Actually, it's just forget the system and the structure to the care coordination. The actual process is actually very difficult. It's a little bit painful. Care coordinators have to have a structure to their month. They need to know who they're calling, when they're calling them. They have to have a really good structure for documentation on those calls. They have to look at, and then before they pick up the phone to call a patient, they have to look at various different touch points. They have to look at, they're looking in the EHR, which requires them to have access to the EHR and a good understanding of how to navigate the EHR, and looking at the patient's updated problem list or most recent appointments, upcoming appointments, labs, recent doctor notes. Then they got to look back at their notes, which unfortunately more often than not is still in a yellow pad. And so they're trying to look at their notes, even if it is properly documented. And so then they pick up the phone, they call the patient. Hopefully they get in touch with the patient. If not, they have to try again, document that, try again. And then they have a conversation with the patient. Now, if the patient's talkative, then that may be a good thing. If the patient's talkative around their health goals. If the patient's just talkative about their cat, then often that can go on for an hour. And if the patient's non-talkative, then it's really difficult for care coordinators to ask the right pointed questions to pull information out of the patient. And so being effective with care coordination is it's a huge challenge. As integral and essential as it is equally challenging. And so these are some of the practical reasons for low adoption. Let's move on to the artificial. So we've covered why care coordination is super essential. You all understand this. Let's move on to artificial intelligence. I'd like to explain what artificial intelligence is for those that are not familiar. There's really three things that are necessary to understand. Artificial intelligence in general. What does that mean? Why isn't it just intelligence? The second thing is going to be LLMs, or large language models. And the third thing is going to be NLP, or natural language processing. And it's these three components together that come together to create this huge boom that we're experiencing right now, most notably with the launch of ChatGPT back in November of 22. And so let's begin with an overview of artificial intelligence. So what is the definition? AI refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to think, learn, and make decisions just like humans. It encompasses a variety of subfields, including machine learning, where computers are trained to learn from data and improve over time. So it's literally artificial, fake intelligence. It's meant to mimic human intelligence. And by fake, I don't mean in outcome, I mean in non-human. What are the applications? AI is used in numerous fields, obviously including healthcare. Self-driving cars would be Tesla's all AI essentially. Finance, and many other fields. It's responsible for personalized recommendations on streaming platforms and virtual assistants like Siri or Alexa and more. And so AI has been around for a very long time, right? Obviously, the Matrix was created around the concept of artificial intelligence. And so it's been worked on for a long time. And the reason why we're going to talk about these three things is because it's specifically these three things coming together in a consumer-facing application that has created the boom that we are experiencing right now. Because, like I said, Siri, Alexa, all these various platforms, any personalized choice is technically a form of artificial intelligence. And so, why are we seeing this huge boom now? We'll explain that with these by stacking these three things together. Next is going to be the large language models, otherwise known as LLMs. The definition: LLMs are a type of AI model specifically designed to understand, generate, and manipulate human language. They are trained on vast amounts of text data and can perform tasks ranging from translation and summarization to content creation. And so this is a step where it's trained on text, and it uses that to then use it takes that and then uses artificial intelligence to do something intelligent with said text based on a massive data set of tons and tons of text. That it then uses to create intelligence to output other text. Okay. Examples of this would be ChatGPT 3 and 4 from OpenAI. These are examples of large language models. Throw a number 2 in the chat if you've actually used ChatGPT since it's come out in November of 22. I'm curious. And so these can write essays, create content, answer questions, and even generate code given the appropriate prompts, right? So super powerful tools, and we'll talk about the third step. This is what really blew out the industry of artificial intelligence. Working mechanisms. These models analyze. So how does this actually work? These models analyze the patterns of the text data they are trained on and learn to predict the next word or phrase in a given sequence, enabling them to generate coherent and contextually relevant text. So it is taking, millions and millions or billions of text data and using that to have intelligence about what your next word is going to be, what your next word is going to be. That's how it can continue writing something for you. And so it's using all the data that it's trained on to have an intelligent, an informed decision as far as what to do with said data. The third and final piece here to understand is NLP, or natural language processing. The definition is NLP is a branch of AI that focuses on the interaction between computers and humans through natural language. The ultimate objective of NLP is to read, decipher, understand, and make sense of human language in a manner that is valuable. Its applications are used in sentiment analysis, chatbots, translation services, and more. Any tool or application that processes and analyzes large amounts of natural language data typically uses NLP. So this kind of works hand in hand with the LLMs, where it's ingesting data, but now it knows how to kind of it's the relationship between the data and the human, right? And so this is the part where on the back end it might be gibberish, but it now kind of can speak the same language and understand the same language as humans. Creepy story from a couple years back in Facebook. They were training an AI model. And they took 2 AI machines and told them to go ahead and negotiate together on a sale, something. And to the engineer's horror, the two started speaking first English and going back and forth, but everything in the brain is actually just data. It's all just data. And so they basically started becoming more and more efficient with their back and forth until they started essentially, they created their own language and started speaking in a language that was completely incoherent and unintelligible to the actual trainers. And so they totally freaked out and pulled the plug. But that's actually more of a reflection of what's going on in the brain. And so stacking on some natural language processing helps with that relationship between the artificial intelligence and the computer data and what's going on in its brain and the human. So that's the relationship thing. In summary, so let's stack these three things and understand why this has become so powerful as of November of 22. AI is the broad field of machine learning and intelligence as simulated by machines, right? So that's piece one, is just simulated intelligence. LLMs are specific AI models designed for understanding and generating text. So that's the text part of this. And then NLP is a subfield of AI focusing on the processing and understanding of the human language. So when you stack these three things together, which kind of gets more and more narrow, you end up with a consumer-facing application like ChatGPT and Bard and these various other ones that can ingest a human question or a prompt and then spit out really accurate, intelligent data. And for any of you that have actually used ChatGPT, you will know how mind-blowing it is to start, and then we get used to it because that's how we are as humans, right? Okay, so now let's talk about AI in healthcare. There's a lot of promise around AI in healthcare. I personally believe that the healthcare industry is going to be the most quickly impacted industry by artificial intelligence. And the reason why I believe that is specifically because healthcare has been so historically behind, technologically speaking, that there's been like so much almost crust built up in workflow, in processes, that just hasn't really caught up to even the last generation of technology. And AI is going to give the ability to wash through that in a tidal wave and wash away all of that, so to speak, crust in workflow. And so there's a lot of promise. There are people that are talking about, actively working on AI imaging, right? AI has the ability to actually detect tiny microscopic abnormalities, and then and use that to be possibly better at diagnosing than the doctor, possibly. AI robotic surgery is a cool one to think about, where it can be so precise that you can do procedures in a much less invasive and complicated manner, because you would literally have these robots that would using AI would be able to pinpoint exactly and just be more intelligent about surgery. And so that's another one that's being talked about in pretty much every aspect of healthcare. There are multiple companies that are working on some massive application for artificial intelligence. And so there's a lot of promise. The challenge, but there's equally it's challenging just as much. And the reason is because healthcare is not like it's not like trying to help you make a decision on what to order for lunch. Healthcare is human beings' lives. And so first and foremost, AI cannot be 97% correct if it were to help in diagnosing a patient or in surgery or something like that. It can't be 99%. It has to be really 100% accurate and true, because we're dealing with human beings' lives. The others, and it's simply not necessarily there yet. The other side to this is the regulatory nature of the healthcare industry. AI has a lot of red tape that it will need to cut through before the regulators actually give the green light for it to be involved in any kind of super meaningful way clinically, right? And so these challenges are really inhibiting the ability for AI to be meaningful in a clinical way. Now, there's still, like I said, there's many companies that are really working on this. Some of them are already seeing successes, but it's going to be a long process. And so while there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of promise for AI in healthcare, there's an equal amount of challenge. Let's contrast that with AI for care coordination. Okay, so I'll go back to my experience and what I've been doing internally. So we've got our care coordination team. We're speaking to thousands of patients a month, and I know their processes. I know their pain, the pain points that they have. And then I'm watching this healthcare AI industry evolve since November of 22. And obviously, there's multiple companies that have been around before then, but really they've become pronounced since then. And it hit me that care coordination is given the challenges that AI in healthcare has, care coordination is the perfect space that can actually be impacted tomorrow, well, now today, by artificial intelligence. It is the only space in healthcare that is super meaningful for clinical outcomes, for better patient outcomes, and yet does not suffer from the downside and the challenges that AI might have in any other clinical sense. Why? Because, as you know, care coordination is it's low physician intensive care, right? It's relatively it's care coordinators with the sole job of asking the right question to the right patient at the right time to better manage that patient, to be more proactive about their health, which will then decrease costs, like we talked about in the first slide. And so on the one hand, it's super integral, like we talked about, to value-based care, to ACOs. This is why this is a big part of the strategy. But on the flip side, there's no diagnosing happening. There's no medical advice happening. It's all about, like I said, asking the right question to the right patient at the right time. And so I'm watching all this, and I think that the way I like to look at care coordinators is I like to split them down the middle into heart and brain departments. Contrary to some other folks, I believe that the human, at least as of now, has a unique value proposition when it comes to the heart department, while AI clearly has a unique value proposition in the brain department. That would be the ability to process ridiculous amounts of data in an intelligent way. And I see many companies that are trying to now have the brain, so to speak, do everything and take over the heart, as I call it. And once again, by the heart, I mean the empathy, the delivery of care, the human touch, if you will, right? The hand holding. And so I think that the brain trying to do that, mistake. You have other companies or organizations that don't recognize the abilities of the brain, and they try to have the heart do everything, and that's simply inefficient. And so what I'm doing internally is I am building out the brain to amplify my care coordinators' hearts, is the way I look at it. And so I think that we can actually dissect the two, separate the two, and say, all right, let's have the human be not just good at what they do, but 1,000 times more effective by only focusing on what they're good at, and be empowered by artificial intelligence, instead of trying to bring in some sort of AI bot or some sort of AI text tool for our patients, or an AI care coordinator. I've seen some of these as well. Instead of trying to go in that direction, which I know practically the patients don't take well to, let's put the human being in the actual delivery of care, but have them empowered by AI. And so to me, that is the perfect way to say, this is going to directly affect better patient outcomes, but we're going to skirt all the liability issues and the regulatory issues and the, with healthcare, because there's no diagnosing involved, there's no medical advice. It's simply care coordination. And so what are we doing? So here's the secret sauce with what we're doing. I'm basically, what I'm doing internally is I'm building a system that essentially understands patients' care plans. And so it'll be specific to the objective of the program. And in that care plan, it'll have the patient's goals, challenges, obviously the problem list, There'll be social determinative health questions, contextual health questions, resources available to the patient, medication regimen, all the details that would help get the patient to their goal. We also have a gigantic library of static education. Once again, no diagnosing or advice. Static education around the chronic conditions. And then most potently, it's listening in. We're listening into the conversations between the patient and the care coordinator. And so now what we're able to do is the next month before the care coordinator picks up that phone to call the patient, they click a button that says create call plan. And we're spoon feeding care coordinators specific questions and pieces of education that is designed by this brain to not only move the patient on their health goals, but it picks up seamlessly from the conversation last month. And then when they hang up their phone, it spits out their SOAP note, which now, they have their documentation and action items. That's just the basic level. But as we're building this out, what we're doing is, and this is what I mean by building the brain to amplify the heart. We are incorporating behavioral science. We're incorporating persuasion techniques, human psychology, and basically building the brain in a way that the way it prompts the human care coordinator to ask questions, it's not just about what to ask, but it's how to ask it and when to ask it in the most effective way. Because one of my personal issues that I like to talk about with healthcare is that the incentives are very perverse, especially for the ACO and especially for anyone in any kind of value-based care environment. You are incentivized as the medical doctor provider, you are incentivized for me to change my health. And that's just, it's a weird dynamic, right? Imagine you had a conversation with a financial advisor, and the dynamic of that conversation was the financial advisor was begging you to sit down with them for 20 minutes a month to go through your spending habits. You may sit down with them, you may not. Then you'd probably go and continue racking up debt on your credit card because in one year, out the next, right? And so what we have to accomplish in value-based care is figuring out how to get the patient on board in that conversation. And that's where the engagement is so important. And this is the central focus of ACOs and of anyone really that's taking liability for patient outcomes is how do we fix that engagement piece, that we get that patient on board with this conversation, right? And so that's where one of the beautiful things that we're doing is by building, like I said, persuasion and behavioral psychology into this brain, you're able to affect that. Here's an example, and this is just an idea that I had as a non-behavioral scientist, right? Imagine if a patient's on a 12-month program for CCM. We're trying to manage their hypertension, diabetes. And for the first 3 months of that 12 months, imagine if instead of asking questions to the patient to try to move them on their health goals, imagine if for 3 months, all the questions are designed to get to the patient's why. Why do you want to manage these conditions? Why do you want to be alive longer? Why do you want to have more energy? And that might be because they want to walk their daughter down the aisle. They might want to be at their grandchild's graduation ceremony, right? You get to those real life reasons. Now, 3 months in, first of all, as a care coordinator and a patient, we've built a relationship. And second of all, now we're both showing up to that conversation in an at least equally emotionally equitable manner. And now we have the platform for actually affecting some change with that patient. And so as humans, that is impossible to do for the 200-300 patients that you might talk to a month. But programming this into an AI brain, you can keep track of all that. And so that's just one idea from a behavioral perspective. But also just proactive quality. So analyzing for tone. Is the care coordinator rushing the patient off the phone? Are they actually checking? Are they saying the items that the call plan is telling them to say? Are they, if it's CCM, did they actually obtain the consent that they have to obtain? And so analyzing for quality and then creating proactive flags is going to make everything super seamless. And so the care coordination experience is just it's transformed. It's now You're coming in, you're reading prompts, and it's just the other way that the rest of humanity is going. Everyone else is prompting AI. We're having AI prompt the human, and making the human as good as AI instead of the other way around. So care coordinator sits there, gets prompted by these super specific questions, delivers the care in the most excellent manner, although, and it's being analyzed, and they can have their AI coach as part of the system tell them that they need to slow down. And then they hang up, all their documentation is done, their action items are there. So here's what you have to do based on that call, coordinate XYZ. And so for the care coordinator, now they're just doing what they're good at, which is actually providing some real human patient, loving care coordination. The other thing from a data perspective, which is obviously super integral for ACOs, right now, if you asked me, hey, Mendel, you've been doing chronic care management with these, 1,000 patients for the last 3 years, right? How do you know that you're successful? Pretty much, I would have to run a claims data report for hospitalizations before and after, and then judge them and see if there's been a decrease in hospitalizations, right? That's really archaic, and there's so many variables that go into that can make it just completely pointless. And so now everything is being analyzed, everything's being housed. You come to when we come to our system and we say, show that we've been successful with this patient, the system's able to spit out an intelligent response that says, over the last 2 years, we've spent 15.2 hours with this patient. On 5 different occasions, care coordinator X helped the patient with a medication refill. On 3 occasions, we actually saved that patient from ending up in the ER due to XYZ, and basically give a really intelligent response to that will directly draw the line between cause and effect, right? Action taken versus outcome achieved. And every piece of data is citation into the actual piece of that puzzle. And so this is the next level. This is where AI can be implemented and transform your lives as ACOs today. It skirts past, like I said, the liability issues of healthcare. It's not there yet, part of healthcare, because it's in the hands of humans. It's being implemented by humans. And so this is really where it is. We're seeing it transform our processes to just in an exponential way. It's been I'm very excited about it. It's been tremendous. So let's go back to our questions. How can artificial intelligence help my care coordination efforts? So this is how we've been doing it. I'm not going to tell anyone what to do, just sharing the so to speak secrets on what we've been doing, which is actually building out the brain in order to amplify the heart, so to speak, of the care coordinators to make them 100 or 1,000 times more effective. Can I trust artificial intelligence? To a certain extent, yes. To a certain extent, not. AI is not at a place yet where in healthcare where it can just be left to its own devices. And so in this way, once again, AI is not the one at the pass. It's the human. It's the care coordinator. And so I would recommend whatever applications you might be using to make sure that there's those checks and balances and human oversight on whatever it's doing. Will AI replace our jobs and our care coordinators? I strongly believe no. I believe that it will augment us and our care coordinators. I've done this personally in my life. I've augmented a ton of things in my day-to-day from AI, with using AI, and I think it'll do, and we're doing that currently with our care coordinators. I think it'll do that for each and one of us, but will it replace us? No. How can I sift through the noise and stay ahead of the curve? And so I think following the right people, LinkedIn is obviously a good platform. Not trusting the things that you see necessarily on your Instagram feed or YouTube feed. LinkedIn, you can know who's posting it, and basically following the right people. They should that are serious and are leaders and are actually implementing. They are people that will probably give you good data. But if you see something that's overly spammy and just, oh, here's the latest prompt that will save you, that will make you $1 million by next week with no work, probably ignore those. And as far as staying ahead of the curve, I think that what I shared today is an incredible example of how you can actually implement something today that is on the bleeding edge, not just the cutting edge, but like the absolute bleeding edge of where AI's capabilities are. And so I think that answers that. Before we move into Q&A, once again, I super appreciate everybody that's been on today. I hope this was valuable. You can find me on LinkedIn, very active there. My name is Mendel Erlenwein, Erlenwein, first name Mendel, Mendel. You can find the Healthcare Trailblazers podcast on YouTube. Once again, just past 5 million views. We have some fantastic guests. And then finally, if you want to learn more about my theory behind what we're doing with this product, you can read my book. It's called Unleashing Value: The Case for AI and Value-Based Care. It's available on Amazon, and that is. And I encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions about how to implement. This isn't something that we're just building for internal use, but it's obviously something that we are looking to change the world with. I think it's going to change, starting with changing the world is a big step, but starting with care coordination and value-based care, I think it's going to transform the way that value-based care is delivered by lowering costs tremendously, by stripping out the whole pre-call, post-call work, and then increasing quality tremendously, which is the two levers that you need to pull in any kind of ACO or value-based care environment, and increasing quality lever by like we said, tracking with the quality, allowing the human to have their full brain into the conversation and not get burnt out. And so there's so many tremendous quality aspects to it. And so I definitely recommend reaching out to me. Once again, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can shoot me an email at mendel@previva, previva.com. Would be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mendel. It looks like we don't have any questions today. I think you answered them all very productively.
Cool.
I just want to say thank you for taking the time out to present this information to us today, and thank you for everyone for participating in today's webinar. We will be sending an email with contact information if you have any follow-up questions, along with a link to the webinar recording. Please feel free to share that link with anyone you may think may be interested in learning more about what he covered today. Also wanted to remind everybody, if you haven't registered yet for our fall conference, it's less than a month away, October 25th through the 27th in Orlando. We hope to see you all there, and thank you all again for joining us today on today's webinar. We hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.